Late childhood and teenage years, let's talk about it. Hello all, how is everybody doing today? I'm doing rather well, and this time I'll be on my phone. This way, no blackouts will occur. Let's get started then. Where did I leave off? Well, I left off talking about the different surgeries that I've been going through. And so I'm going to skip ahead and talk about a specific surgery that impacted my life, or the one that I remember the most. Anyway, a hip ball was coming out of my socket. And so I had to get that put back in before it fell out completely. The doctors were saying that if I didn't get it put back in, that I would have difficulty with my legs severely later on in life. And so on June 30th, 1999, I went through a surgery known as the Elizarov. I had the Elizarov placed on my leg. It was an apparatus full of springs, metal pieces, and pins that went directly into the leg. It was like this. The surgeons broke my leg on purpose, then put the ball back in its place, then put the Elizarov on with the pins so that the ball would be held in place. The ball of the socket, or the ball that goes inside the socket, would be held in place. I lived with that on my leg for 3 months, from June 30th until September sometime. I had to go through taking care of that with saline, which my mother helped me do, or basically did for me back in that time. One of my pinholes got infected because you had the hole, the liver of the middle pieces going through your leg the entire time. And so I had to learn to walk with 15 extra pounds attached to my leg. It made it difficult to climb up and down stairs, things like that. But it made for a good armrest. I didn't start school the same time everyone else did. I did homeschooling for about a month and a half. And then when I went back to regular school, then I realized how far behind I was. Because it was only for a couple of hours a day. It was the school appointed teacher, so it wasn't like my own tutor. It was something that the school appointed for me to stay current, but it didn't really work out too well. And then after I got everything taken out with the pins, there was like a lot of blood and a lot of everything else. Again, saline every day because of all of the big wound spots. What made it more interesting was that the place that it was put onto already had like a big giant scar all from 1991 on there. It was interesting that I have scars on top of scars on that leg. And this happened during the summertime, so I missed out on any kind of summer vacation during this time frame. Actually, there was one thing I did do before then. We did take a trip to Daytona Beach and see some of Disney World, but right before the surgery happened. So this was the middle of June, after school got out, like early to the second week of June. We went down there for about a week. And then my step-grandmother took us to see Star Wars Episode 1, and then it was a double feature. It was also Star Wars Episode 1, and then we went to see Tarzan. Well, actually, I think Tarzan was first, then we went to see Star Wars Episode 1. Because that is what was out at the time. I can't believe this happened over 20 years ago. 21 years ago this happened, almost to the letter. Hello, Janet Byron. How are you doing today? But this was my second to last surgery. I had another surgery in 2000, and I'll get onto that later. But let's go back to my late childhood years to like middle school. I talked about this a little bit last time in my previous video in regards to early childhood. But middle school was all about a one-to-one assistance in early high school as well. Because that's all the school could afford, and they didn't pay these people too much either. They got paid on a stipends. It wasn't an actual salary. It was basically $7 an hour. I mean, maybe back then it was seen as low. Today, in today's money, it would have been unheard of. Basically, somebody would come in and help me write notes because I couldn't write it fast enough, and then I would just, during tests in class, I would just tell her what to write down, and she would write it. It was always female the majority of the time. And if they hired an assistant for like that couple of school years, there's 7th grade, 8th grade, and then 9th grade. By 10th grade, I did my own thing, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. But yeah, I passed the class, and for went out for customer service for. What is that thing that you need to do? Community service for 75 hours in the state of Maryland in order to graduate high school and just graduate in general, regular school. You have to get 75 hours of community service. Otherwise, you don't graduate. So instead of doing tech ed, like building things and learning how to use power tools and wood shop and all of that other stuff, what they had me do is work with the school librarian, just putting things away in the right order in the fiction section. So I learned the Dewey Decimal System, and that's how I earned about the bulk of my hours, 45 hours doing that. By the time I got to high school, basically I had a rude one-to-one assistant, and I used to go home crying every day just because of how mean she was. Eventually I got a better assistant, but at the kind of a negative cost to the other students, because there was the people that were in a self-contained classroom that were a lot mentally worse off and a lot worse off in general being with disabilities than I was. Basically, they took the assistant out of that classroom and put the assistant that I had in there, which was not a good idea at all. It worked out to my benefit, sure, but it wasn't a good idea one way or the other. But hell, because I guess, they always say you reap what you sow, but in this case, she got way more than she ever thought that she would get. I'm sure they gave her a run for her money and then some, because she didn't get paid jack to do anything. It turned out that by the end of that high school year, the 9th grade, like the last month or two, the assistant that I had, that was the previous assistant for all the people in the self-contained classroom, she got a job doing something else, somewhere else. So I ended up getting a new assistant by the name of Mrs. Johnson by the end of that school year. But that's okay. It doesn't really matter too much. I'm trying to get things off the screen here. But yeah, that's pretty much how I lived. And in 10th grade, when I was back then, I was in Tawnytown, Maryland. So I was no longer in Rogerstown or the Owings Mills area. I was, my father and mother got a divorce. And because my father kept banging on the door to the old house, we ended up moving in with a friend with the person I made friends with. His dad kind of came down. Again, I'm backtracking. I know the story's a bit out of order. I didn't know what else to say about my childhood years, but I guess I should backtrack that some. I apologize for being all over the place. I had a structure in mind, I just forgot a few details, and now that it's coming into view as I tell the story, now here we go. Well, what ended up happening is my parents divorced. Of course, the mother got the children, as was the case back then in the 90s. But I made friends with a kid named Tony, and I began to go over to his place. And then during the summer of 1995, no, during the summer of 96, after I graduated elementary school, Tony's father, Mark, ended up dropping him and his sister off to at my place while the father worked during that time frame. And so my mother eventually decided to take us and then move up to Sunday Court, which was about 8 minutes away or so. And we lived there for about a year. Then they decided to get a house together. And Mark is the one who taught me how to, I guess, wipe my own ass. As previously stated, I didn't learn how to wipe my ass until I was 10. Hello, Tamara. I think people are going to, keep messaging a place to heal, so I won't even bother putting it down anymore. I'm just going to ignore it and keep telling my story. So we moved to a place in Tawnytown. It was built during the World War II, so it had steps. It was kind of weird that the bedrooms up on the second floor, the closet was right by the entrance to the door. So if you opened the door and somebody was in the closet, the potential, I guess they could potentially be getting hurt because the door was right there. So if you opened up hard, you would slam the closet door, and then that could slam into them. I don't know why they would build things that way in the 1940s, but I guess it worked back then, so hey. Hello, Kayla. How's it going? But I went to school, and then by 10th grade, I had another one-to-one assistant. And my mother got sick earlier in the year. They thought it was pneumonia, and then it turned out to be cancer. We didn't find that out until December of 2000. And so my mother passed away rather quickly. I mean, I guess it wasn't that quick because I'm pretty sure it was building up over time. But she had been a heavy smoker for years. She would do an activity, have a cigarette, do another activity, have another cigarette, do an activity, have a cigarette. That's the way it was. But the school years, it seemed a little bit less advanced up in Tawnytown than it was back in Deer Park. But that's what was my first perception. But as I came to realize, it wasn't really that. It was just the way that they taught things and the way everything was. And it was just because of my own, I guess, prejudice, so to speak, that I, believed that whole thing. I didn't really, want to talk to anybody. I was kind of rude to a lot of people. And then eventually I kind of, evened out around 8th grade. But yeah, middle school was a very weird time. But it's a weird time for everybody. It was a weird time for me. At the end of 8th grade, I made a friend named Ken. He was into video games. I was into video games. We went to the 8th grade dance. It was fun, I guess, but nothing major. There was a little bit of a dance I went to at a church back in 7th grade, but I didn't really get up and do anything. It was basically sitting there eating snacks, listening to music. I did eventually eat a Skittle off the floor, and I think it was a grape Skittle. Then I got sick later that night and threw up. Go figure, right? But yeah, after the Elizabeth operation happened, for whatever reason, my left foot couldn't go down. I kept walking on the my toes all the time and never on the ball of my foot. So I had a different surgery in 2000. And this was my final one, where they finally did some things to my leg and got all of that to relax out, the muscle to relax, and eventually I could walk again. And I was afraid that I would always fall. That was always my fear when I would first start walking after the cast came off. Eventually I had to go with it and push forward. My mother passed away, and then we moved in with my father. My brother and I went back to Reisterstown to live with my father after my mother passed away. So I went to Franklin High School. Wow, what a big change that was. Kind of interesting that in middle school, I always thought that Deer Park Middle Magnet School was more advanced than Northwest Middle School. But then going from Francis Scott Key High School back to Franklin, down to Franklin, well, that was a world of difference. That was behind back then. I hear the school's doing well now ever since they got the new principal in there. But dang, that counselor in that office, Miss Fink, I'll never forget her. She wanted to make sure that I was taking a full day's worth of classes and never doing a half a day, because they had a 45-minute 7-period schedule, whereas Francis Scott Key had a 4-day schedule instead. So she was trying to get me to take all these classes just so I wouldn't be home during the day and causing trouble, XYZ, whatever have you. And we told her numerous times, my brother's going to pick me up after school, and he's going to take me home. I'm not going to cause any trouble. She eventually relented, and I got what I wanted. I took 4 classes a day, was home about 12, 12:30, whatever it was. My brother and I would watch Bulletproof, the movie Bulletproof with Adam Sandler and Damon Wayans every day after school. We watched it so much that I barely watch it now because I can't watch it because I've seen it 20 billion times already. He would go off to work because he was of working age back then. So was I, but then again, I was handicapped, so what were they going to make me do? Most of the jobs that the school had to offer, the school offered were physical labor kind of jobs. So I would just do my homework, so on and so forth, and just go to school for the rest of the year. That's how 10th grade ended for me. Then in the summer of 2001, my father met somebody named Linda on the eastern shore of Maryland. That's what the area is called, the Eastern Shore. I forget exactly where she lived. I don't believe it was Easton. I believe that it was it could have been Easton, but it might have been just outside of Easton. He became so smitten with her that they got married in October of 2002. 5 months later, she ran off with $23,000, my father's money, and she was also a helper in 11th grade throughout that time frame, and through the first half of 12th grade. Because she came to live with us back in the fall of 2001. So I couldn't have half a day back then. I had the full 7 periods, taking English 11 or 11th grade English, so on and so forth, doing all that kind of stuff. And then I kind of went back to the one-on-one assistant time frame. And then in 12th grade to finish out the rest of the year, then my father stepped up to the plate because he was retiring and helped me finish out the 12th grade and pass all of that stuff. It was kind of funny. I remember my science teacher in 12th grade, Mr. Pritchett. It was his first year in Franklin, and that was his last year. He was like, after this, I'm out of here. No, I think it was his second year, because last year he was there too, but I never met him until that time frame. He was just out. The teachers got so sick of the way Franklin was, people that Franklin were, that they were like, screw this, I'm out of here. My 11th grade English teacher, she retired because she was old anyway. She was getting up there, and it's just, people couldn't take any more of the arguing. Any people, half the class was always failing the English classes all the time. It's like, why even come to school if you're not going to do it? Just because, oh, you have to finish school. I mean, technically you don't, but it's a good idea if you do, to have the general education diploma requirement. But hey, if you're not going to do anything, why even bother showing up? Why have the police chase after you and be truant if you're not going to do it anyway? And so I finally graduated high school in 2003, May of 2003. I can't believe it's been that long. I can't believe in 3 years it'll be my 20-year anniversary of when I graduated high school. What, I'll be 37 at that time? That's crazy. And so because the people would, office or the administrators would not let me go first or last. They were like, oh, everybody has to go in order. It's like, okay, I'm in a wheelchair and I'm handicapped and everything else. Why can't you just let me go first or last? Even though it's out of order, they should just let me do it that way. But no, because they wouldn't let me do that, we decided not to even go to the assembly, just to take the diploma, screw the assembly, and we just went out to Bateman's for dinner, because that was the cool thing back in the early 2000s, late 90s, was to go to Bill Bateman's restaurant. And we had a celebration that way. I went off to community college. And yes, I'll talk about the other aspects of my life. I'll talk about the whole transgender aspects of my life, because that was beginning to develop around 2000, 2001, or that time frame. Yes, I know I look young. People always tell me some people actually think I'm still in high school. They think I'm 16, 18, or 22. Some people think I'm 25, but mostly around 18 to 22 is where they peg me. I'm about 12 years older than the maximum of what people say that I am. So with the whole trans aspect will be a different video, because that'll be way too long to go in adding into this whole teenage years. So I went off to community college. I went part-time, and because I was too scared to go full-time, because I didn't think I would pass my classes. I tried to get my driver's license numerous times. They shut me down. They sent me through this DOORS program. We got the hand controls put on, only to find out it was put on, the wrong way. I finally, the one rehabilitation specialist told me that I passed. Then she told the MVA, or the DMV, which is known as the MVA in the state of Maryland, that I, couldn't pay attention, and then so that I failed. I got angry, didn't really try again for a very long time. DOORS fell asleep on us. That guy just fell asleep on us, and they were like, hey, we're not really going to help you too much, because they help out on a case-by-case basis, and since I was seen as high-functioning, my case went to the back of the line to get help with the whole driving education portion, as well as getting employment for my age. So I didn't date during this time. I didn't have any urges sexually. Like I said it before, I'm 34 years old, 34 and a half almost, and I'm still a virgin. Having sex just wasn't a priority for me. Falling in love just wasn't a priority for me. I mean, I wouldn't say that it wasn't a priority. I felt that I couldn't be loved due to my disability, because no one's going to love a handicapped person. That was my thought process back then. I was young and I didn't know any better. I didn't know all the stuff I knew now. Who's going to love a handicapped person? What can I do? Why can't I be like everybody else? Why can't I drive like everybody else can? Why do I have to go through all this extra stuff? Why everybody else gets to have the easy way? That was my thought process. And I was told under the old guard, oh, if you graduate college, if you get good grades, then the doors will open for you. And so that's what I did for for the good portion of my rest of my teenage years and early adult years, is go to college and get on the honor roll and get, or whatever, dean's list, honor roll, whatever you call it, and do school. Thanks so much, Kim. That's why I'm doing all this. Because first of all, Spirit's telling me, oh, you gotta share more of your story and talk to more people. Funny thing that I would be an admin here and be able to meet new people, as well as and then start sharing my story again. But that's basically my teenage years. I didn't really learn how to drive, or I didn't really start that up again until around age 25, 26. Until I was almost done college. That's when I finally started to do things again. Hello, Kim Siegel. But I'll say this, at least I didn't have any drama or any problems per se. I didn't get into any fights in school, didn't get into any drugs because I thought I couldn't do anything. All I did was go to school, do the classwork, come home, do the homework. That's it. That's all I ever did. Nothing more, nothing less. Kind of funny that I have not had a surgery since I was 15. So I'm 34 now, so more of my life has been spent without surgery than having surgeries. I guess my legs don't really need any more fixing. No more orthopedists, no more of anything. The only reason why I had so many surgeries to begin with is because that's what they told everybody to do. That's what they told my mother to take me, have an orthopedist to make sure that I'm on track. I also had, not an orthodontist, an optometrist every year too, for the longest time. All the way until 2011. I think that's when that kind of stopped. Because the insurance changed and they wouldn't pay for the person I went to. I eventually found somebody else, but then, and I just didn't get any cards to keep on going. And I just stopped going overall. But my teenage years was pretty much spent playing PlayStation 1 and playing PlayStation 2. Not really talking to anybody, not going on, not really doing too much. My brother did take me to a show, a video game concert that an orchestra played called Play, a video game music orchestra down in Virginia down at a place called Wolf Trap. That was pretty cool, even though I kind of complained about, what they didn't play, because I was a complainer left and right. I complained about everything life gave me, everything that I didn't have. I complained. Hello, Kathleen Taylor. Thanks so much for stopping by. And so I went from, being codependent on my mother to being financially codependent on my father, and he wanted to control everything anyway. And since that didn't really impact me, at least that I thought it didn't impact me back then, I let it happen. Maryland's quite big though. I mean, it might be small on the map, but I mean, Baltimore's not the only place in Maryland. There's Frederick. There's everything else. As far as I'll get into this a little bit later on with the second driving rehabilitation specialist. Is that he was based around in Frederick. Thanks so much, Anna. I was about to call you Jenna and then Arena. My eyes are not, maybe I should go to the optometrist and get my eyes fixed then. Let's see how that goes. Yeah, because before I got into a car, for example, I had to do a whole bunch of silly tests, a bunch of mental tests. Like go from A to B, from B to C, but it wasn't all in order. It was all scattered around the page, and you had to see everything within about 50 seconds so that you could pass. I had difficulty passing these tests, and it was just, and I get very angry because I couldn't do something so stupid. Come to find out I wasn't actually that dumb. Rochetown was a good area. Tawnytown was, I guess in the boonies almost. It was in farmland, but it was a good area. It was pretty much right by Pennsylvania. I mean, if I had to have a choice, but if I had to go back to Maryland, then I would probably choose to live where I lived before because that's the best area. The Owings Mills, Rochetown area is pretty much flat land. It's not like Towson or Ellicott City or Columbia where it's hills and it could flood. So if you're going to go to Baltimore, if you're going to go to a suburb, Rochetown Owings Mills is the place to be. Pikesville is closer to the city and so it's a bit more crowded and there are some bad areas of Pikesville. But Pikesville is okay. Westminster is pretty cool. The other thing I found out the hard way is that Carroll County doesn't have a lot of sidewalks, so you can't really walk places. You have to drive. Or take a bus. That's the way things are there. So I would say that Rochetown Owings Mills is going to be your best bet if you're going to live in the Baltimore area, especially the western part. Go to Lido's, go to J&P Pizza. Go to a place called the Rochetown Friendly Diner. They've always got the best food in there. Good soup. They didn't exist back when I was a teenager. They've been around for about 9 years now. A little bit over, I believe. Oh, Hartford County? I'm not familiar with Kingsville. I don't think that was ever on my radar. I've never really been there too much, if at all. I normally stuck around Baltimore County, Carroll County, and then every once in a while I would have to go to Howard County for Glen Burnie and Columbia. I think Glen Burnie's in Howard County. I'm not too sure about that one because Glen Burnie is where the DMV, the mothership DMV, is like the main branch of the DMV in Maryland is in Glen Burnie. Yeah, that didn't seem too big. It didn't. I mean, I never really heard of it, so I'm pretty sure it can't be too huge. But Maryland can be quite big. To get from one side of Maryland to the other side is about. It would take you if you drove from Ocean City all the way down to the left side to Cumberland, or was it Oakley? It would probably take you about 5.5. No, it would take you about 6 to 7 hours to drive all that. Because it's about 3 hours from Baltimore or Rochetown to Ocean City, and it's about 3 more hours from where I was to Cumberland. And actually, it might even be 4. 7 hours it'll take to go through, and that's just from like right to left or left to right. That's not even including up and down. I don't even know what it's like on the south part of Maryland, St. Mary's, where St. Mary's is. Haven't been down that way. Yeah, Glen Burnie is a little bit crowded. It seems to be a little, that's why I like Owings Mills and Wrightstown, because it's all flat land and it's not all hilly, and it seems to have like a good, it's easier to get around in there. I mean, I'm pretty sure once you know everything, it's easy to get around every area. But when you're trying to travel around to different places, Owings Mills and Wrightstown in Pikesville is the place to be. Anyway, I suppose I'm just rambling at this point. I'm not really telling the story anymore. I guess other tidbits to note. When Mark and my mother got married, they went to Cancun, Mexico for their honeymoon, and they brought back all sorts of weird things. Pipes that look like penises, cats, like I guess what, figurine cats. A wallet. What else was there? Dang, I can't even remember now. I don't know. Yeah, Glen Burnie just doesn't seem to be the place to be. That's why I'm glad where I grew up. Not that I'm not saying that these things are bad neighborhoods. I'm just saying that I like the area that I grew up in. It seemed pretty good. But then again, it's all I knew, so obviously I like it. I'm pretty sure there's probably people who hate Owings Mills and Wrightstown, but it's pretty good to me. My father also did business up in Hunt Valley every once in a while too. He had a retirement fund with a guy named Tony. I forget what his last name is. So Hunt Valley, Cockeysville area. Went up there a little bit. My father's favorite place was the Treehouse for to go to dinner. My father didn't baby me like my mother did. It was more about financial control. He worked for Verizon for numerous years. He worked even before it became Verizon, back when it was Bell Atlantic at that point. And he worked at the phone company during the day, being a supervisor for his team during the day, and then at nights and on weekends he was a real estate agent. He always made pretty good money. So I never lacked or was without. College I basically got for free because I was disabled for the Elite Community College, but then when it came to 4-year college for the last 2 years and a half it was supposed to be, then my father used his retirement to pay for my college, so I have no student loans or anything like that. My teenage years were rough in certain ways, but I'll talk about my transgender story, being a transsexual, next time before I get into full-blown adulthood. Or I'll talk about, back to the way I was back then with it. And then as I tell more of my story, then it'll come out. But I figured I would make that one a separate video because it makes more sense that way. Thank you all for watching. As always, keep pushing forward and stay epic.